All right, Jonathan. So, how do we, as the church, be evangelistic? What does that mean?
So evangelism is the idea of preaching the good news. Evangelism is not simply good news. It is the idea of declaring and proclaiming the good news. So there's a couple of things that come to mind when we think about that. We want to, number one, understand the good news. We want to make sure that we know the good news and understand the good news of the gospel. We want to somehow tell people the good news. There's multiple ways throughout history of doing that. So even in the last 100 years, we've seen various styles of sharing the good news. Mm-hmm. So some people take the New Testament teachings of being evangelistic. They take that. They go stand on the street corners and stand on boxes and preach. And I have friends that do that, and I've been invited to do that. I've never done that. There is a right way and a wrong way to do that. Most of the time, we connotate that with the wrong way of doing that. But there is a right way to do street preaching, and it is effective from time to time. So some people like to do that, and that's fine. Others like to use tracts, and so I know preachers, I know folks that carry tracts in their shirt pocket or their wallet or something, and they'll leave it at the waitress, at the restaurant when they leave the tip, or they'll just be talking to somebody on the sidewalk or something and just leave them with a tract, a gospel tract. Some of those are great, and again, some of those can be done the wrong way, and so. So there's that. There's also what we call lifestyle evangelism, or sometimes it's called relational evangelism, and it's the idea that we live our lives in such a way that people are going to see the change in us and be curious and intrigued and want to know more about the change in us, and so opening up that doorway to share the gospel with them. Relational evangelism is more the idea of building a relationship with the intent of sharing the gospel. So I'm going to build relationships with my neighbors. So I plan on being in this house for several years. I plan on them probably being there for several years. And I plan on I don't have to go out and cram the Bible down their throat today, because I know I'm going to I want to build a relationship over time to earn trust and respect so that we can engage in the gospel through those over the fence kind of conversations that we have. So multiple ways of doing that.
But it's not just viewing you as and seeing your life, right? There's a gospel conversation that takes place in the relation, right?
Absolutely. So that's the proclaiming and the preaching part of it. There's a quote that is often attributed to Francis of Assisi, and the quote is simply, preach the gospel, use words if necessary. I had a t-shirt as a kid that had that on the back. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then as I got older and matured in my understanding of theology and my understanding of the Bible, I realized that was nonsense. Yeah. Words are necessary. It's not preach the gospel, use words if necessary. Preach the gospel, words are necessary. They're always necessary. We are talking about the Word of God. Right.
Right.
And so we have to use words. We have to be audible with that. We have to use language. We can't just do good deeds and expect somebody's going to learn about Jesus because you pay it forward or something like that. Yeah. Like we have to use language, and so absolutely we build relationships, and that's the way I like to do it. I'm not a door knocker.
Right.
I get very uncomfortable knocking on doors. I don't particularly like going to people's houses that I don't know, things like that. It's just not me. I wasn't raised like that, and frankly I don't want to get shot, so or dog bit. So so anyway, so I don't do that, right? So my style, I want to build a relationship with you. I want to get to know you. So I want to get to know people in our community, in our town, at my local credit union, at the place I buy gas, the place I buy groceries. I want to get to know people and build a relationship so that in time, through general conversation, I can bridge that conversation into the gospel of Jesus and be able to share the gospel with them.
So living evangelistically, you would say, would be finding opportunities to have gospel conversations.
I would say that's a good question. I would say living evangelistically is living with intent and living with an agenda.
Yeah.
Everybody has an agenda.
Yeah.
Everybody has an agenda. Christians have an agenda. Our agenda is to share the good news of Jesus with the lost and dying world.
Yeah.
And so when I'm going out somewhere, I need to have that in the back of my mind. Now, I'm on it. When my wife says, "Hey, will you stop and get a loaf of bread?" I'm going in the food line and I'm looking for a loaf of bread. Right? I'm trying not to buy donuts. I mean, that's that. But as a believer, I should be listening to the words that the cashier is sharing with me.
Yeah.
Right? If she's down and depressed, discouraged about something, I have an opportunity to speak some encouraging words to her. And if I will be intentional every time I go in the food line and find out, okay, where's she at? Which one's she at? And well, she's got 6 people in her line and this person's only got 2. Well, I don't have anything to do. I can wait a few extra minutes to be able to share the good news with her and to continue building that relationship. Though that's a very distant relationship, I can build that relationship. And so living evangelistically is living with intent, with an agenda, and here's the cliche way of putting it, living on mission. Yeah. Living on mission. We're always thinking about what we can do. So, and I'm going to go further. As a parent, we should always be doing that with our kids, right? Yeah. So looking for opportunities to share the gospel with our kids and make disciples of our children. But also when I go out into public, when I go to food line, I'm taking my kids and they're, "Daddy, why are we waiting in this line? There's nobody over there."
Right.
Because Daddy's building a relationship with this cashier and I'm trying to find a time and a way to be able to share the gospel with this cashier. Right? So teaching my kids that our lives do not revolve around us, but God's got us here on this earth for this time to proclaim the good news with the people.
And prayerfully, that person would eventually come to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, prayerfully. And here's the other thing is I also realize that if I stand in that line week in and week out and I just offer that encouraging word or that, hoping at some point that I can have a 10-minute conversation on a break to be able to actually go further and actually open the Bible and share the gospel. But also realize that if I don't ever, and a lot of times I don't get that opportunity. But here's the good news about it. I believe in a sovereign God, right. and I believe that if I don't get to share the good news, for all I know, you might come through that line tomorrow and lead her to Christ the very first time you ever met her.
Right.
Right? Like that's the sovereignty of God. So I'm just sowing the seed every chance I get. I'm just walking along throwing these seeds out, and I'm going to trust that God's going to grow the seed. And you may be the farmer that gets to come along and harvest that seed one day. And I may have done a lot more sowing. Right. But who cares?
Right.
Right? Like we're just going, we're going to trust that in God's sovereignty, He's going to save her when He wants to, in His sovereign time. So, great question.
That's good.
Good question.
Good.